So when we talk about the Wisdom Council, often people can't really understand why we work with random selection, like sortition based samples, and they want to have a stratified sample to make it, to make it right, so it's representative, or for whatever reasons. But it seems that there is an issue with the whole thing with the random selection, and people have difficulties accepting it as legit,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah. Well, though I think it's a basic confusion between a deliberative council, and there's lots of them, the citizen jury, citizen panel, the deliberative poll. There's a lot of deliberative councils out there, and they all do a random selection and then make a presentation just like a wisdom council. So it seems like they're the same. But the fundamental difference is that we are using a different kind of thinking. We are facilitating not deliberation, but what we call choice creating. And this, when you do deliberation, well, you're trying to influence the decision makers. So you want a certain sample size. If you get a certain sample size, then you can be statistically significant. And if you're really only doing a one-time thing, so you want a council that looks a lot like the people. So there's often a casting call to try and get, all right, we need a Native American and we need a Black person and we need to have a balance of men and women. And so you're doing this stratified sample, and you're the real operator here. You're the one that has the power, sitting there saying we need to break up this group in this way. And then the idea is to influence. Usually with this deliberative council, there's a vote at the end. So this random selection, the deliberative poll, they try and get a statistically significant sample size, and then they have discussions about what the options are, and then they have a vote in the end. And the citizen jury process has a vote in the end. And then hopefully you go to the elect leaders, or you present to the leaders, and you try and influence them with, hey, this is what the citizens would have come up with if they had been educated, and so you should pay attention. And hopefully they do, but often they don't. Usually, in fact, I think what they do is they pat people on the back and say, thank you very much for your participation, this is great. But they don't have to pay any attention at all. We're doing something different. We are actually randomly selecting. So we want, and we cheat sometimes, I must admit. But ideally, we randomly select from the general population, and we do it over time. We do it every month this is an ongoing process, not a one-time event. So in time, we're going to get people in the proportion in which they are in the population. We're going to get, Black gays and Native American women. And I mean, we'll get the right proportions if we get this happening properly. And if there's enough, obviously it's hard to get people to come. So we get a lot of self-selected aspect often. But if you made this a constitutional amendment, for instance, in the United States, and then you did your random selection, you would get those people. They would show up. You'd get the exact, pretty much, amount. So that's what we want. We want the real people, and we want what they really say, because our objective is not to affect the legislators. which does happen. But our main objective with our vote, we're not voting. We don't do a vote in the end. So the random selection, these people talk in this choice creating way that we dynamically facilitate, and they reach unity. And they're excited.
Hmm.
And they tell their story, but they're not talking to the legislators. They're not talking to elected officials. They're talking to the people. Because what we want is that group to stimulate a whole system response. We
Mhm.
want the whole population of Germany or the United States or Vorarlberg to respond, yes, we're on board with this. And then the elected officials have something to work with. Then it's really a voice of the people, a powerful voice of the people saying, here's what we want, here's what we think the situation is. And then the elected officials can stop. I mean, they can stop playing the money games and they can really respond and serve the will of the people. Now, to do this, we don't need a stratified sample because
Mhm.
we're doing it in this ongoing way. And we don't need a sample size that's statistically significant. Those are irrelevant concepts.
Mhm.
We need, this group is really a symbol of all of us, and we randomly select them and they reach unity and they disappear. But and then they come back, a new group comes back. So what we're getting is a symbol of all of us in an ongoing conversation,
Mhm.
and a way that all of us can participate in that conversation. So the Wisdom Council is just there for a brief moment, they're gone. And really what we have is this ongoing conversation of the entire population with an adequate way to articulate what is coming up in this large conversation so that we, the people, can really come into existence and be powerful and can speak and can provide leadership to not just elected officials, but to the economic leaders and our economic system and our the people. So that's a long-winded answer, but it's covering these topics of statistical significance
So
and
yeah, so I have a question. So in reality, if you tell people they were doing the wrong concept all of their life, you know, or like their life as a scientist or like a politician or whatever, um, they'll react with objection. You know, they'll make sure that your concept is not applied. So even though that we know from experience that it works really well. So what, do you have an idea how we can get them on board without like, you know, starting to fight maybe?
well, you're worried about the individual people that are kind of in their own silos, for instance, or
Sure. Well, it's
radical.
political scientists who see, oh, there is a group who wants to do the first National Wisdom Council in Austria, and they do it all the wrong way, you know?
Oh, well, we don't need the political scientists really to do this. We do need some money. We need a few people who get it. And honestly, the political scientists seem to be about 40 years behind because they are in love with the idea of deliberation.
Mm-hmm.
So getting them off that track is doubly hard because
Mm-hmm.
they stay on that track of deliberation and deliberative democracy because it's
You mean
measurable.
deliberation a way where you stay in where you stay in like your mind all the time, and it's all, you know, like critical thinking and or what for you is deliberation? What's your
Well,
definition of
God,
deliberation?
I, there's a there's, I guess, a couple of meanings, you're right, but the actual root for the word is
Mm-hmm.
de, means away, cut away, and liberation means, I mean, it means to weigh. It
Mm-hmm.
means to deliberate means to weigh. We're going to weigh the different options. And ultimately, here's what I was getting at a minute ago. The word decision means to cut away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about decision making is one whole realm of thinking where we use our judging minds to cut away. We're gonna vote, and we vote individually, and we add up the votes, and then collectively, supposedly, we made a decision. But of course, we didn't ever even talked. We never got started. And then, so what people do is to try and keep that system, but to make it better, we add deliberation. So
Mm-hmm.
now if people thought about the options, there's maybe 5 options, but they weighed the options carefully. That's deliberation. And we mean the general public, and we mean the elected officials, hopefully. Then we're making our system work a little bit better. Now it's not just this argument and blue team and the red team. We're trying to implement a process where people use their rational minds a little bit, and they open their minds a little bit. And so they do deliberation. And the way that ends up being is they do a random selection of people, and they give them information, and they give them a chance to talk, and they maybe have a moderator there for a week or for 2 days or something. And then they vote, and then they share the results of their vote
Mm-hmm.
with, usually with, the decision makers. It's really about influencing the decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a kind of a picture of the whole realm of deliberation. And maybe not the whole realm, but it's trying to make the idea of decision making work. Now, what we're doing with dynamic facilitation is we're saying we don't want to dismiss that. We say, great, okay, good. 98% of the time and our systems are set up for decision making. We're not saying bad decision making, bad deliberation, good choice creating. We're not doing that. We're just saying there's a missing piece here of choice creating. That's where we all say, time out. Let's get out of our judging minds, get into our creative minds, and face the problem. What is the real problem we're working here on? What are we really trying to do? Are we okay with the fact that that whole deliberative thing isn't changing the system? Was it okay that we're going to trash the planet ultimately? No. This is the part where we start thinking about what we're really doing and what we really want. And the only possible answer is for us to reach unity. I don't say agreement, because agreement is a word that works only in the decision-making world. You agree, you decide, agree. No, we're not talking agreement, we're talking unity. That's where we're all being creative together, and shifts and breakthroughs happen where we discover, oh, hey, we're all saying the same thing. So this is about adding the missing conversation to our public systems, to ourselves. We got to do the same thing in our own lives. We can't just live our life staying in the rational. We tell ourselves it's rational. What if you look at it, you realize they're actually fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a blue team versus red team fight, but we try and be more rational. But what we're doing is setting up a moment where people step aside, they turn their hats around, they turn their heads around, and they say, okay, just tell us what's going on for you. How are we doing? And we're trying to face these problems like The real problems, climate change, the fact that we're fighting and we're not getting anywhere, the fact that the distribution of wealth looks like an L, a capital L, rather than there's no curve anymore.
Mm.
So how do we have a real society? And we just take a little bit of time and we come up with unity. And this time it's a random group. And they present not to the decision makers, quote, quote, but to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And then the public can talk. And now we want to set up our questions to them, and we want to set up the context so that they're talking and thinking in the same spirit of choice creating. And they're basically reaching unity too. We're all going, yeah, why aren't we doing that?
Mm.
And that's what we're finding actually happens in a wisdom council. To the extent that we can test this, we're finding that the larger population generally is going, yeah, why aren't we doing that?
Mm.
So, and this is the piece that's missing in society. This is called consciousness. This is where we are conscious of what we're doing so that we don't just play the game and screw the world. We can't maximize profits of different companies forever and expect the public interest to be served. There has to be a thinking process. And what we're doing is noticing that thinking process, if it exists, is in the spirit of choice creating, not decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't say bad things about decision making. It's great. We just add the missing piece. And in order to do that, there isn't much needed. We can do it.
So what is the difference in quality you see there, or you realize there is, between decision making on the one hand and choice creating? What is this quality, inherent quality that you're talking about?
Well, I'll give you an example. One time I got kicked off the stage. It was in Perth, Australia. Okay, I mean, they really didn't want me to talk. The original title of the conference was Innovations in Deliberative Democracy. And I asked them to change the name since I was going to speak, to make it Innovations in Democracy. But it didn't really work because everything I was saying was upsetting everybody, because the requirements for the kind of thinking we're talking about do not mesh with the kind of if you want to do good deliberation, then you need to make sure that your moderator is neutral. You want to make sure that you have experts giving people neutral information. You want to make sure that you have a stratified sample of people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole different set of criteria to make sure you do good, rational, deliberative thinking. But with choice creating, we're asking people to just show up authentically and to care about issues. And it's really up to the facilitator, who we call a dynamic facilitator. It's really up to the dynamic facilitator to make sure that everybody feels safe, even though you might angrily be releasing your venting about the other political party. Or we're not asking you to be deliberative. We're not asking you to follow guidelines that are posted on the wall. But it's up to the dynamic facilitator to help you get in touch with those feelings that are coming out, and you are beginning to integrate those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So you are beginning to realize, for instance, that it's not that those guys are evil, it's that I have concerns that they're evil. That's a big step. And that I am worried about so I'm articulating the concerns that I have of what might happen. And then I'm saying rather than having the 5 choices be presented to me, I can't, it's not easy. We're not making it easy for me. We say, what is your answer? Your answer. And so each person has to come out and speak with authenticity and creativity. And so we're holding people in a creative, authentic space when they talk. So that's a start to answering your question.
And now I do have a question to like, so now they all don't know anything about the topic maybe, and so they just, you know, they just talk stupid things because they're uneducated maybe, and it's randomness. So,
Yeah.
you know, even those uneducated people will be there, and the solution can only be a bad one if that happens. And you know, that's the stuff I hear a lot. And yeah, how do you feel when you hear that?
Well, we are not, see, in a deliberative council, it's again a distinction between deliberative. In a deliberative council, what you're doing is you're creating a little bit of an elite group because you're teaching them stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of an elite group.
But you're not teaching people ahead. If you are in a wisdom council, you're not
Right. In the
educating
wisdom
them
council,
about one certain problem or something, like aspects
right.
of it or stuff like that.
Right. I'm drawing a distinction between, because people want to think, again, they keep thinking deliberation process. And in that process, you need to educate people.
Mm-hmm.
In a wisdom council process, okay, they need to know a little bit about it. So when we did it in Santa Cruz, for instance, we had 1 hour set aside for 3 people to talk, and then just tell a little of the history and what happened and whatever, and then they were done. That was it. We
Talk
don't
about
want
the issue that was.
Yeah,
that
there was
or,
a pro side and a con side, and then there was kind of a historical side. But we limited it to 1 hour.
mm-hmm.
And that's it. Because we don't want this group to become anything more than just ordinary people with a little bit of information.
Mm-hmm.
Because the point of this group, this wisdom council, is that everybody is going to identify with them. When they speak, they don't speak to the leaders suggesting an answer. They're not
Mm-hmm.
recommending an answer to the leaders. They are speaking to the public the story of their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it's the story of how they came up with new solutions, whatever, new thinking, new ideas, how they could design their system.
yes,
that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Here's what we got. We got this little bit of the story, and then we had this yes and no, and then we moved beyond that, and we met another, and then we moved beyond that, and we realized it isn't even the real problem. Like for instance, in the Santa Cruz thing, their conclusion was, this is not in the right department. This shouldn't be a transportation issue. This is about the whole community needs to be talking about this issue. And even though we've been arguing for 10 years, we haven't started talking.
Mm-hmm. So I remember it was about an old railroad that was closed down a long, long time ago. And there were discussions about what to do with that railroad, basically, right?
Right. And there was the
Then they
rail.
realized it's not the Department of Transportation, but it affects all of us in this community, right?
Yes, right. And so the Wisdom Council's point was, hey, this is a community choice. This isn't a transportation committee argument choice, power play choice. This should be the whole community talking really like we are here in the Wisdom Council process, figuring out what we all want from this opportunity and what kind of, how that wants to shake out. Do we want to make sacrifices to make that happen, or what? How do we do this? And Now, so anyway, that's the kind of thing that the Wisdom Council can do.
Mhm.
They can reshape the whole context rather than a deliberative process, which just is given the 5 possible answers, and
Mhm.
then they go back and forth on what those are, and the experts came up with the answers.
And also, to my understanding, the Wisdom Council can always, change the topic because the people realize that's not what we want to talk about. This is
Right.
not. This is, yeah.
Right. Well, when the Wisdom Council meets, at some point, there's kind of this recognition that we are a symbol of everyone. And, it's helpful to have somebody give us an issue, but really, it's up to us. We are the people. There's no higher authority than we, the people. And that's what we symbolize that. So, yes, we can change even what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And that's the thing, is that the Wisdom Council process is an ongoing process.
Mhm.
And the real authority isn't the Wisdom Council itself, it's the whole system conversation
Mhm.
that gets stimulated, that we all begin to realize, hey, we are the ultimate authority.
Mhm.
And we have a way to talk, we have a way to express ourselves. And that's the ultimate authority in society. Not, we don't have to look back 200 years to know what we're doing. Like in the United States, they had a founding moment. Okay, great, it was phenomenal. It was a lot like a Wisdom Council. But now we shouldn't be looking to what they were thinking 240 years ago to find out what we should do today. That's a crazy thought. But that's what we have. We have a Supreme Court trying to find out what the original founders were thinking. No, we need to find out today what the real people are thinking. And most importantly, it's thinking in the quality of choice creating,
Mhm.
not in the thinking quality of deliberation or decision making.